Right. Order, order.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
A point of order. Dean Russell.
I beg to move that this House do now sit in private.
The question is, this House sit in private. As many of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no.
No!
No! I think the noes have it. The noes have it. Right. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Bill as amended in Public Bill Committee to be considered.
No.
No. So no amendments on consideration. Third reading what day? No. No.
King's consent.
Good. King's consent. Right. Who's doing it? Oh, thank you. Stuart C McDonald.
Here, here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to move that the Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Bill be now read a third time. And I am incredibly happy to be able to bring the neonatal bill back for further debate. At the heart of this debate and at the heart of this bill is a simple idea. Babies in neonatal care need their parents, and their parents need to be with their babies. And we must do all we can to give families this vital time together. And today we have the opportunity to help give them that time without the added worries of missing work and losing pay. But if I could start, Mr. Speaker, by taking this opportunity to thank colleagues across the House who have supported this bill's journey so far. And I'd be very pleased to start actually with Madam Deputy Speaker giving her kind words and insight at second reading. She noted the unanimity of the House that day, where we heard from members right across the chamber, including many with very personal and powerful stories and experiences. That consensus continued at committee, a committee whose membership included 3 of the 4 different ministers who have at various points been responsible for the bill and very supportive of the bill, including the now minister on the government benches today, and I'm very pleased to see him in his place. But I'd like to give particular thanks to my honourable friend for Glasgow East and the honourable gentleman for Thornbury and Yate, who have both been especially helpful and who have been campaigning tirelessly on this issue for several years. But I'm grateful to colleagues in all different parties for their support both during proceedings in the House and in discussions outside. And I hope that spirit of consensus will continue today, and I am optimistic that it will, this being one of the very rare proposals that could be found in both the SNP and Conservative manifestos at the 2019 general election. And if that spirit of consensus does continue, I will have a whole host of organisations and individuals to thank for helping to champion this cause and to build that consensus up. So, Mr. Speaker, over the next few minutes, I want to just briefly recall the problem that the bill seeks to address, then detail how the provisions of this bill will address that problem, and finally, I'll explain the positive changes that were made in the committee to improve the bill. So, first of all, the issue that needs to be addressed. So, the arrival of a new baby is, of course, overwhelmingly a time of joy and of hope. But an estimated 100,000 babies every year are admitted to neonatal care in the United Kingdom following their birth. Many of these babies will spend prolonged periods of time on a neonatal care unit in a hospital as a result of being born prematurely or with other health conditions. So for these parents, this becomes actually an incredibly worrying and stressful time. And of course, they will be desperate to focus on getting through this challenging time, supporting each other and being with their baby, or indeed babies. But very many find that difficult or feel unsupported. Fathers, if eligible, only get 2 weeks of statutory paternity leave, and when this runs out, they may be called back to work while their baby is still in hospital. Mr. Speaker, how can we productively work when your baby is on a ventilator in an intensive care unit? And where babies have an extended stay in hospital at the start of their lives, mothers report that 39 weeks of paid maternity leave sometimes feels barely like maternity leave at all. A large proportion of this time can be used up busing alone to and from a distant hospital where their baby is in neonatal care, sometimes juggling other responsibilities, perhaps another child, all of which leads them to feel that they do not have sufficient quality time at home with their baby before having to return to work. Some will feel compelled to leave work as a result, and many do. None of this is good for parents, and none of it is good for the developmental outcomes of premature babies, denied important early and regular contact with their parents. So how will this bill assist? So the successful passage of this bill will create a new statutory leave and pay entitlement for the parents of babies receiving neonatal care. Employed parents who find themselves in this stressful situation in the future will know, as a minimum, that they are entitled to paid time off work to care for their babies and that they won't suffer detriment from their employer as a result. This protected time off work is crucial. We know that there are some brilliant, supportive and flexible employers out there who deserve to be commended, and it would be great to see some more follow their lead. But sadly, these remain the exception rather than the rule. So that is why we need a neonatal care leave and pay entitlement to protect and support many more parents. So I turn to the main provisions of the bill. If the bill is passed, neonatal care leave and pay will be available to parents of babies who are admitted into neonatal care up to the age of 28 days and who have a continuous stay in hospital or in another agreed care setting of 7 full days or more. Neonatal care leave will be a day one right, meaning that it will be available to an employee from their first day in a new job. Statutory neonatal care pay, like other family-related pay rights, will be available to those employees who meet continuity of service and minimum earnings tests. The intention is that parents will have an entitlement to up to 12 weeks of neonatal care leave, one for every week their child spends in neonatal care. This leave will be protected and a person should not suffer any form of detriment due to taking up their leave.
Will my friend give way?
I'll give way here first.
I thank my friends for giving way, and I am so delighted to be here in order to support him. And I'm delighted to see that this bill does have cross-party support indeed. Does he agree with me that the provisions in this bill go a long way in ensuring gender equality for fathers and non-birthing parents who are often excluded from statutory maternity provisions?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her support and for her intervention, which I fully agree with, and very happily also give way to the honourable gentleman opposite.
I'm very grateful for my right honourable friend, and it's commonest place to congratulate members for passing their bill, but I think sincerely on all sides he will have support today, and I will be supporting his motion. So I hope he will allow me just to probe a little bit, as I wasn't on the committee, Mr. Speaker, which is he's talking about the benefits to employees and to families. But obviously there is a burden on companies that will have to pay this. Could he just advise the House in committee, was there a discussion about those burdens, and what's his understanding of what those additional burdens on companies may be?
Very grateful for his support, and a perfectly fair question which I'll come to in a little bit more detail later on. But essentially the provisions for businesses will be the same as for other existing rights, so that there will be reimbursement up to 103% for small businesses, up to I think it's 93% for larger businesses. So actually for those businesses who already follow good practice, there will be a benefit because they will be reimbursed for what they are already doing. And at the same time, I think a lot of employers feel, and the feedback from employers is in actual fact that they benefit from this because they have a better relationship with their employees, and the return to work is also much smoother and much more successful. So I thank him for his question. But just continuing with the main provisions of the bill, Mr. Speaker. So for parents who meet continuity of service and minimum earnings tests, the expectation is that neonatal pay will be paid during the leave at the statutory rate, which is currently just shy of £160, or 90% of the employee's average wages, whichever is the lower of those two, and hopefully that will be uprated in line with increases to statutory payment, something that we will monitor closely. But again, that mirrors the existing family leave and pay provisions, such as paternity, shared parental and adoption and maternity after the first 6 weeks. The process for reimbursing employers, as I say, will also mirror existing schemes. There will also be flexibility about when the leave is taken. The likelihood is that many fathers who only have 2 weeks of paternity leave just now will want to take their neonatal leave immediately thereafter, while their child is still in neonatal care. The situation for mothers is a little different because once maternity leave commences, a mother cannot stop that maternity leave in order to take neonatal care leave, otherwise she will lose her remaining maternity leave. So neonatal care leave is therefore to be flexible in order that mothers can add it to the end of the maternity leave and any other forms of parental leave that they may be entitled to. So with that in mind, the bill provides for the window of time within which neonatal care leave can be taken to be set out in regulations. However, this window will be a minimum of 68 weeks following the child's birth, as that ensures that the mothers and fathers have sufficient time to take their neonatal care leave alongside other leave rights that they may be entitled to, rather than having to lose out on any other such entitlements. Finally, Mr Speaker, I turn to explain the amendments that were made in committee. Firstly, Clause 2 of the bill was amended to remove the power in there to amend primary legislation via secondary legislation, a so-called Henry VIII power. That had originally been included to ensure that the bill, on becoming law, worked effectively alongside other legislation which is going through Parliament at a similar time to this bill. Upon further assessment and examination, it seems that this power is not required, and the clause now only empowers amendments to secondary legislation. Mr Speaker, given that I spend an awful lot of my time as an opposition MP shouting about excessive and inappropriate use of Henry VIII powers, it is pleasing to be able to have taken at least one of them out of this bill. Secondly, and perhaps more significantly, Part 2 of the schedule to the bill was also amended by changing the definition of relevant week inserted into section 171ZZ16 of the Social Security Contributions and Benefits Act. Now, the definition of relevant week is an important one because it fixes the point at which it is assessed whether a person is entitled to neonatal care pay. The bill, as drafted at introduction, defined the relevant week as the one immediately prior to the week in which neonatal care started, and that would be similar to the drafting of equivalent provisions for parental bereavement pay. However, if a parent was already receiving statutory pay, for example maternity pay, in the relevant week before their child enters neonatal care, their income could end up being lower than usual, negatively impacting their ability to qualify for neonatal care pay. And so, for those employees who are eligible for other parental pay entitlements, such as maternity, paternity or adoption pay, the amendment made in committee changes the definition of relevant week for neonatal care pay in order to align it with the definition of relevant week in these already existing entitlements. Amending the bill in this way ensures that parents who are already low earners and perhaps only just above the earnings threshold don't therefore miss out on the entitlement to statutory neonatal care pay simply because they are already receiving another type of family-related pay when their minimum earnings for neonatal care pay are assessed. Where an employee would not qualify for any of the other statutory parental pay, the relevant week will continue to be defined as the week immediately before the week in which neonatal care starts. Mr Speaker, having set out some of the detail of the bill, let me conclude by reiterating. Yep, I shall happily give the permission.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, as I wasn't in committee, can I just ask a particular question? I'm going to sound very smart when I do this, but in Part 12ZE, Section 171ZZ16, entitlement, Clause 2, subsection A, there is reference to a child who is receiving or has received neonatal care. And my question, as the honourable gentleman has been, and this is a sport point, has been very clear on some of the Henry VIII powers, is, and on how the entitlement to pay will take place and is aligned with other aspects of funding that's provided. What is the definition of neonatal care in practice? Because it's going to be defined in regulations, Mr Speaker, but in practice, is it limited to parents of children who've been in NICUs or other facilities in hospital, or is there a broader definition?
So, within the bill itself, the definition really encompasses neonatal care up to 28 days of the new baby's life. There has to be further thought given to precisely whether we limit that to on a neonatal care ward or whether we should go further than that. And I hope we do go further than that, because there will, for example, be families who have babies at home, perhaps to an extent, but regularly required to be out at hospital appointments, or may even have regular interventions and people visiting to provide care and treatment. And so we have to think, how can we define that in such a way as to make it clear, but also not exclude people simply because they aren't physically in a hospital 24 hours a day. So again, absolutely fair point, but further work needs to be done before we come to a final conclusion on exactly how that should look. But Mr Speaker, in concluding, I just want to reiterate that what we are debating here is the traumatic and stressful experiences faced by families with wee ones in neonatal care. And at the heart of this proposed legislation are vulnerable babies who need us to do more to help the parents at a crucial time. We need to ensure, as far as we can, that these parents have the time and resources to focus on their babies without the additional burden of worries about money and time off work. There are tens of thousands of families each year counting on us to get this done and to get it right, and I ask honourable members across the House to give this bill their support.
The question is that the bill now be read a third time. Mary Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for calling me to speak in this debate, Mr. Speaker, and thank you also for making the accommodations to enable me to speak today. It is indeed a pleasure to rise to speak after the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East, and I congratulate him for getting this important bill to this stage. And may I say, it was a pleasure to support it at second reading and through its committee stage. At second reading, the Honourable Member commented that we should all be enthusiastic about this brilliant bill, which I know will make such a huge difference to tens of thousands of families each and every year. And I hope the level of cross-party support for it today will reflect that enthusiasm. It's estimated around 50,000 babies born in the UK each year need to spend more than 1 week in neonatal care. And this policy change will provide relief and support for the families of those 50,000 babies, meaning that they can concern themselves and focus on the well-being and care of their children and not fret about their employment or income. At such a stressful time in parents' lives, it is right that we should ensure that added financial burden does not add to that stressful situation. I know the member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East worked closely with the charity Bliss, who have supported families across the UK, including in Cheadle and Greater Manchester. And may I take this opportunity to thank them on behalf of my constituents who have been supported by them and by other groups who operate to support people in this position. For parents whose children may spend some weeks in hospital, this means that they will not have to miss out on that valuable time with their baby at home. Importantly, this paid leave can be taken within a window of, I understand, 68 weeks following the child's birth, handing the power to parents to make this entitlement as useful as possible to them in their situation. This bill, which amends the Employment Rights Act, creates a natural extension to the UK's already generous parental leave and pay by entitling parents of babies who need care in health settings for more than 1 week before they reach the age of 28 days. The 12 weeks of paid leave would be on top of other statutory leave and pay entitlements, and critically, as the Honourable Member set out, is a day one right, meaning an employee is entitled to it from the first day in a job. Now, we know that many employers already handle these situations sensitively and with compassion, but it is right that this care and understanding extends across all employers. Quite simply, this bill is also about caring for and valuing people. I'm glad that the Government is also supporting amendments introduced at the Public Bill Committee by the bill's sponsor, including an amendment which makes changes to the relevant week to calculate pay and seeks to ensure that parents who are low earners don't miss out on an entitlement to statutory neonatal care support. It is important that a policy change such as this is delivered in the most effective and accessible way. During previous stages, members from across the House shared their own deeply personal experiences, as well as the stories of their friends and constituents. We will all know someone who would have benefited from this leave entitlement, and it will be good to know that this will not be an added burden at a time of worry and distress in future. I know this policy has been in the works for many years, and the Government is committed to delivering it. So I thank once again the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for bringing it forward, and I'm pleased and hope that it will have unanimous support across this House.
Alex Davis-Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is an honour to follow the Honourable Lady, and may I too echo and congratulate the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for all of his hard work on this bill. It is a genuine honour to be speaking in the remaining stages of this private member's bill. We all know how rare it is for there to be for a time when they can actually progress in this place, but the particular importance of this bill makes it an even greater achievement. I too would like to place on record my sincere thanks to Bliss, the charity who do so much work to help parents with children and babies in the neonatal unit. All of their hard work for helping sick and premature babies every single day of the year. And I would also like to probably declare my interest, Mr Speaker, for being a proud Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for sick and premature babies, which has been campaigning on this issue for a very, very long time. And I too place on record my sincere thanks to the Chair of that group, my friend, the Honourable Member for Glasgow East, and all of his hard work. Colleagues may recall that in response to last year's gracious speech, I stood in this chamber and commended the then Minister for claiming to remain very much committed to introducing neonatal leave and pay via an employment bill, only for any trace of the bill to be surreptitiously removed when the moment actually came. In fact, Mr Speaker, that was just one of 20 times that the government promised us an employment bill. I have vocally supported the need to legislate to create statutory neonatal leave and pay since I was elected to this place, so of course I am over the moon that the Honourable Member's bill will soon be sent to the other place and will be one step closer to finally becoming law. This bill is personal for me, Mr Speaker. My son Sullivan was born 2 weeks prematurely by emergency C-section. Sully stopped breathing shortly after he was born and then spent the next few weeks fighting for his life in the neonatal intensive care unit. I will never forget the anxiety my husband and I experienced in those very long few weeks. In previous debates, I have shared with colleagues how following Sully's birth, I was completely dependent on my husband while recovering. We were fortunate that my husband's employer had a flexible approach to annual leave and he was able to take paid time off to support us. But the thousands of new parents with babies who require neonatal care every single day of every year are often not so lucky. As colleagues know, a shocking 1 in 7 newborn babies receive some sort of neonatal care. Paid neonatal leave, as this bill would provide, ensures that parents can focus fully on being there with their new baby without having the complicating pressures of worrying about work or finances. Those precious few days with a new baby are sacred, and for any baby in need of neonatal care, this should be no different. The inflexibility of our current parental leave legislation serves only to worsen what is, for many parents of babies in intensive neonatal care, by far the most traumatic period of their lives. It doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. So while it is welcome that we will likely finally see neonatal leave and pay enshrined in employment law, I must place on record my frustration that it has taken so long for us to have reached this point. Because I'm afraid to say that there has been an absence of leadership on this issue from the government. I'm sure I do not need to remind the Minister that his government made a manifesto commitment in 2019 to introduce neonatal leave and pay, and that this important modernisation of employment law for new mothers and fathers and parents alike has had to be introduced by a colleague, not by the government front bench. Really, this suggests that the government has been asleep at the wheel. Nonetheless, I am of course relieved that the government have supported the bill, and whilst I was not part of the Bills Committee, I am pleased that the government appeared to be constructively working with the Honourable Member to get this bill to where it is today. But I cannot help but think of all of the parents of babies in need of urgent neonatal care who will not benefit from the bill, because for them it is already too late. This bill will be a welcome addition to the statute book, but it is long overdue. I wish the bill every success in the other place, and I once again congratulate and commend the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for his dedication to this vital work. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Dean Russell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I pay tribute to the member for Pontypridd for the emotional and personal tales that she just told. I think it's so important to share those, but also to say them in this chamber must take a lot of courage. So I really welcome her doing that, because I'm sure there's many people at home that will be watching this who will have gone through similar experiences. And may I also pay tribute to Right Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East, hopefully correctly said this time, for bringing this bill in. You know, private members' bills are not something that always get through to this round, and it's very easy for them to fall much earlier in the stage than today. And actually, this is a bill that I know from hearing testimonies in the previous debates in the committee, and also from speaking to members of the public, including constituents of mine, that this has a real personal take on their lives. And when it comes to neonatal care, I think it really brings to life the power that bringing to life brings to our lives. Having children is one of the most, if not the most, precious thing that we can do for those of us who are fortunate to have had children. And I remember in my own time, fortunately, we didn't have to go through the need of neonatal care, but I do remember when my own daughter was born in Watford General, the emotions run so high, and this fear for this precious, fragile, wonderful person that we've brought into our lives, and the fear that something could go wrong, and to know that there are those who've had to go through the distress of something actually going wrong must be so challenging and so difficult to deal with. And that's why this bill is so important, because every year, I understand, looking at the statistics, there are 624,828 births in England and Wales, and 13,500 in Hertfordshire, according to the ONS. But every year, over 90,000 babies are cared for in neonatal units in the UK due to premature birth or full term or maybe sick. That's a huge number, but that isn't just those children, that's their parents, it's their families, it's all of those that need to wrap the care around. And the idea that one wouldn't be able to spend time with their child in those precious few days in that first couple of weeks, to be able to not just be there for the child, but also be there for their loved ones, for their spouse, to make sure that actually they can put the thing that they probably go to work for is put first, and not work that's put first. Now, I appreciate colleagues quite rightly challenge and quite rightly scrutinise what the impact this is on the business and on organisations, because of course there are burdens, if we can call them those, that are placed on businesses, but actually the burden of having a member of your staff or member of your team who is desperately worried about their newborn child whilst being at work, that can't be very productive, it can't be helpful for them doing their job. So actually I would say that it isn't a burden to enable this bill to go through and to follow these rules. It's actually something that will help their business, and it will help build their morale, it will help build their team, it will help make sure that they are being productive. And that's why this bill is so important, because the truth of the bill is that sometimes we hope that we hope that society will do the right thing. And often that is the case. We'll be talking about the TIPS bill in the second session today, which is a good example of that. But actually they don't always do the right thing. And this law will make sure that there's a support there for families. It will make sure that there's support there for the babies as well. But also it will make sure that businesses know that when it comes to family life that's at the heart of this country, that there is the right for that worker to take time off to look after that family member and that child. Now, I was looking up some statistics when researching for today, because as I mentioned earlier, I've been very fortunate to speak in the previous sessions, and incredibly, the numbers are quite high in terms of the toll that has an impact on families and parents. So 2 in 5, so 40% of parents of hospitalised babies have anxiety or post-traumatic stress. Levels decline over time, but a year after birth, 1 in 4 was still suffering. This is higher than generally seen in new parents. And the truth is, this goes to the heart of mental health as well. And next week I'll be bringing a 10-minute rule bill on mental health first aid in the workplace, just to give that a small plug. So you're all welcome to join in on that. But the reason why I say is actually mental health, I think people are far more aware today than they've ever been of the importance of mental health and mental well-being in the workplace. And so when you know that when one knows that 2 in 5 parents of hospitalised babies have anxiety or post-traumatic stress, that's a huge number, you know. And I think when you then look at the fact that that can trigger depression, It can have long-term impact. So that first couple of weeks, so that first few days of being able to be there for your loved one and to be there for the child actually will reduce the risk of long-term impact. It will reduce the risk of long-term anxiety. It will reduce the risk of long-term depression, because that can also have an impact on people's relationships. And those that I've spoken to who've been very supportive of this bill all talk of the fact that this isn't an isolated 2 weeks, 3 weeks is over and that's it. You have your child and suddenly life gets back to normal. It doesn't. When you've got a young child, actually the worries about the anxieties of what that will bring in the future are incredibly strong, and they can linger for years, and they can damage relationships, they can have harm on other children that are in the family as well. And one other point to make as well is that, as I understand it, the average length of stay in neonatal care in England and Wales is 7 days. So again, this bill will do a huge amount to make sure that that first week or two parents can be supported, that they don't have to worry that they're going to damage their career opportunities. It won't mean that it will mean that they won't need to worry that they have to go cap in hand to their bosses to ask for what really is a family right in this country. So I won't talk too long on this, but what I would like to say is just a huge thank you to members across this House for supporting this. I think it's such an important part to show that this country is a country that cares about family, it cares about children, and that builds a better society and builds a better community. So thank you for indulging me to speak today, and I wholeheartedly support this bill. Thank you.
Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my honourable friend, indeed my very good friend and constituency neighbour, in bringing this bill forward today.
Hear, hear.
He won the parliamentary lottery, something which ought to be reformed, but I'll pick my battles in reforming this place for now. To be honest with you, Mr. Speaker, it's been a really difficult week to be elected to this place, but this bill presented by my honourable friend has been a light at the end of the tunnel and sets a refreshing change of tone, especially because it has support right across this House. I do think this bill sets a glaring example of the priorities of both sides of this House, though. The government, who get to set the topic far more often than we do, have opted to spend this time eroding workers' rights, where the SNP are bringing forward a bill giving more rights to workers. This bill seeks to address the inadequacy of existing parental leave and pay where a baby is born premature and sick. It will support and assist families across the UK to make ends meet during an incredibly challenging time and present parents with an opportunity to have more time at home to care for their baby when they eventually make it home to their family. This bill is of particular importance during this cost of living crisis, where working families are crying out for additional support, particularly where a home may need to be heated all day long to provide an adequate temperature for a premature and sick baby.
My friend give way.
Of course I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my friend for giving way. She is making an excellent speech. Does she agree with me that this bill is so vitally important, because at the absolute heart of it, it goes a long way in relieving the additional financial cost for parents, but at what is already a financially expensive time, and removes the worry for parents about the need to pay for the costs incurred when a baby is born prematurely.
My honourable friend makes an excellent and very powerful point about this bill, which will introduce two new rights: neonatal care leave and statutory neonatal care pay. Neonatal leave will be a day one right available to all employees. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for this debate, I spoke with a friend and former colleague, Kirsty Pringle, who is now an NHS registered nurse and also the mum of a premature baby, her daughter Ailish. Kirsty emphasised in her remarks to me just how important both the rights under this bill will be to families. Kirsty explained that too much time was spent worrying that if her baby daughter survived and she eventually got to take her home, she wouldn't have much maternity leave left to spend with her. Mr. Speaker, fortunately Ailish is thriving, but the worries that were only too real at the time still play on Kirsty's mind. Taking sick leave from work to care for your premature baby should never have become the norm. I'm sure many families and organisations will be delighted at the change being implemented with this bill today, and I place on record my thanks and brilliance to the organisation Bliss. And Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to mention my honourable friend for Glasgow East in the context of this bill. He has campaigned on this issue for longer than I've been elected to this place and is watching this debate from his constituency home today in between constituency engagements. Mr Speaker, we should all be proud and enthusiastic about this bill. It will make a huge difference to families with premature and sick babies where there previously have been a significant gap in support. And I'll close by just once again thanking my honourable friend for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's an absolute pleasure to follow many heartfelt and excellent speeches and speak in this important bill that will make a difference to thousands of babies and families each and every year. And can I use this opportunity to thank and congratulate the member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth, Kirkintilloch East for his determination in bringing this bill forward. As the former chair of the charity Save the Baby and the mother of 3 amazing children, this bill is very important to me, and I'm delighted that the government is supporting it. When I was chair of Save the Baby, I helped raise vital funds to fund research into miscarriage and early pregnancy complications, and I know just how frightening and consuming difficulties relating to pregnancy and childbirth can be. I've also had my own children in intensive care, which even now, to be honest, I struggle to talk about. It was so traumatic. 1 in 7 babies born in the UK require some kind of neonatal support, and for parents whose newborn is put into neonatal care, the pressures and the challenges are huge. And this important bill will give them up to 12 weeks additional leave and pay so that they can spend vital time with their baby. And according to the European Standards of Care for Newborn Health, the active involvement of parents in their baby's care on neonatal wards can reduce the period of neonatal care. It can improve newborn weight gain. It can improve breastfeeding rate, reduce antibiotic exposure, reduce readmission rates, and improve child behaviour, and reduce postnatal depression and parental stress and anxiety. So for so many reasons, this bill will have a dramatic benefit on families and long-term baby outcomes. In the 2019 Queen's speech, this government included a commitment to neonatal leave, and as a country we've certainly faced unprecedented challenges since that speech, but it's important that we honour that commitment. In February last year, my honourable friend, the member for Thornbury and Yeo, in his adjournment debate on neonatal leave and pay, spoke of his own experiences of having a son in neonatal care for 72 days. And at that time, the government confirmed its commitment to introducing legislation on the matter. And again, last May, the then Labour Markets Minister, my honourable friend, the member for Sutton and Cheam, reaffirmed that commitment, saying the government is committed to introducing neonatal leave and pay to meet this need and will bring forward legislation when parliamentary time allows. I understand that there are many pressing matters that we need to focus on as a government, but it is equally important that we do not lose sight of the things that matter and the things that are important to our constituents on a day-to-day basis. Neonatal care is such a key issue. Imagine having to choose between going to work or being with your sick or premature newborn child, and you will see just how important this matter is. I'd like to end by saying, on behalf of future parents, I heartily welcome my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth, Kirkintilloch East, his private member's bill, and express my full support for it. And I further express my support for the amendments that have been proposed today.
Simon Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Annis Môn with her very eloquent and moving speech this morning, and likewise other members across the House. So this is a very important bill that we are looking at, and I just wanted to start, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by paying tribute to the Special Care Baby Unit at Wrexham Myler Hospital. The Wrexham Myler Hospital is in the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Wrexham, but as the MP for Clwyd South, it is frequented and used by many of my constituents. The Wrexham Myler maternity unit was under some degree of threat about 7 years ago, and I, alongside many others, campaigned for its retention. And I would just like to quickly mention from the information that's provided by the Special Care Baby Unit a little bit about what they do. And the reason I'm doing this is because I think one aspect of this debate, and I'll come obviously to the parents and the families in a minute, that we should also include is the fantastic dedication, skill and care of all those in the health service who actually look after the babies and the families in neonatal care. The unit at Wrexham Minor has 12 cots, 1 stabilisation or short-term intensive care cot, 2 high dependency cot and 9 lower dependency cots. And the babies are cared for by a team of medical staff led by a paediatric consultant and a team of specially trained nursing staff supported by healthcare support workers, neonatal outreach, speech and language therapists, physiotherapists and many other professionals that work within the team. And they also have a Bliss volunteer who attends the unit every Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m, and provides emotional support. And really the point I'm making at the outset is not only to pay tribute to the hospital that serves my constituency so well, but the people there and the sheer skill and wide range of complex processes which are required to ensure that the babies are properly cared for in the neonatal units. Now, as has been mentioned, Mr Deputy Speaker, in the debate already, 1 in 7 babies born in the UK receive some level of neonatal care shortly after birth. And I think for those who have not had the experience of a baby in neonatal care, which was indeed the case with my wife and I, who our children did not go to neonatal care, I think for many people they would actually be surprised by the high level, 1 in 7 of babies that need some level of neonatal care. And therefore that commends more the bill that has been brought forward by the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East. And I really commend him for persevering with this, which is to the benefit of everybody. And as has been mentioned too, around 50,000 babies in the UK spend more than 1 week in neonatal care after birth every year. And for many families, the inflexibility of current parental leave laws exacerbates these issues and adds to the stress for the whole family. Now, going back in time just briefly, when the government launched a consultation in October 2019, there was a consultation, and the consultation found overwhelming, almost unanimous support for what the bill is proposing. 99% of all respondents agreed that parents of babies who are admitted into neonatal care should have access to additional weeks of leave and pay. 93% of all respondents supported the proposal for a right to neonatal leave from the first day of employment in a role, and 81% of all respondents felt that the maximum number of weeks for neonatal leave should be the same as the maximum number of weeks for statutory and neonatal pay. So, as I say, I commend the Honourable Member for bringing forward this bill, and I'm delighted that it has cross-party unanimous support today. And under the terms of the bill, the families will be paid to entitled paid leave if they meet the minimum service and earning requirements. And leave and pay will last a maximum of 12 weeks on top of their other parental entitlements. And it is estimated, and I think this is an important point which perhaps hasn't been drawn out in the discussion so far, that the annual cost of the exchequer of neonatal care leave, if paid at the statutory flat rate, would be £14.2 million per year on average, alongside a one-off cost of £5 million required to update HMRC system. Now, in all honesty, we sit in this House and we hear figures of billions and billions of pounds mentioned in the House. We're talking about £14.2 million here, with an additional one-off cost of £5 million. Yet, we are talking about 1 in 7 babies born in the UK receiving some level of neonatal care. So, this is not a large amount of money to actually address a vital and very important issue.
But Laura, I'll try to give
yes, certainly.
Just on that point, I thank him for giving way. On that point, though, I think one of the important points, as well as looking at the long term, as mentioned earlier, the anxiety for parents, potentially long-term depression from what could happen is ultimately trauma in those first few weeks. And I think when looking at the statistics on that, we find that there are many, many more people now taking sick leave for mental health and mental well-being reasons. And ultimately what that means is that that's loss of income, that's also loss to the Treasury, and also damage to the individual. So I wholeheartedly agree that this is about, there's an economic argument, but also there's a very personal argument as well long term.
Well, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and if it's not indelicate to say so, I felt that the comments by the Honourable Member for Ynys Môn about how traumatic to her even now to recall the experience, I think that makes the point better than anybody could in terms of the mental health issues that lie at the heart of this. So I fully subscribe to your points. And one of the, I mentioned it with regard to the Wrexham Myler baby care unit, Bliss, which is obviously a key charity that we have been discussing already this morning, which supports parents with sick and premature babies. And I would like to commend them for having campaigned since 2014 around extending leave and pay for parents of babies in neonatal care. And in 2019, the charity conducted a survey which found 2/3 of fathers of premature babies had to return to work while their baby was still receiving neonatal care. And in 2018, the charity ran a campaign encouraging people to call their MPs, and I quote, to put pressure on the government to extend leave for parents of babies in specialist care. And the charity noted that over 90% of MPs were reached through this campaign. There have been many other very articulate and eloquent submissions from Catriona Ogilvy, founder of the Smallest Things charity, Sophie, a midwife from Tommy's, the largest pregnancy charity in the UK, Jane Van Zyl, Chief Executive of Working Families, Caroline Lee Davey, the Bliss Chief Executive. All of them have pointed out the comments that have been made already this morning, that this is a vital, vital issue, and I'm so pleased that we can come together here in the House today to send this bill further on its way. Certainly.
The Honourable Member for giving way. While he's mentioning all the fantastic work that charities do to support parents every day, will he join me in commending the Ronald McDonald House charities who support parents who, like his constituents, have to travel to access specialist services and then need support and accommodation to be with them when they are separated and far from home? Will he join me in commending the work that they do there to support them too?
Yes, it gives me great pleasure to support the comments of the Honourable Member for Pontypridd, who again I felt made a very moving and eloquent speech this morning, which will stay with me for a long time. And I think the point that you make about the outreach, in a sense, and that was one of the points that was made in the Wrexham Myler description of what they do, the outreach on neonatal care. And, you know, if you go to the furthest west of my constituency, to Corwen, Llandrithlo, Cynwyd, I mean, it's a long way to go to Wrexham Myler Hospital. Indeed, that's the point in Wales generally. You have to travel in most places a long way to get there. So this goes back to the point about the complexity of what's supported. But certainly I would fully support the comments by the Honourable Member for Pontypridd. So in conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, I congratulate the Honourable Member for bringing this bill through the House, and I'm pleased and proud to support it.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's always a pleasure to follow the member for Clwyd South, and just like everybody else, I really thank the member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kilkentilloch East for bringing this important bill. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm going to probably waffle a little bit because I've had printer problems this morning, I've technical problems this morning, so this will be as it comes, so to speak. In this place, we get to see so many things. We get to be involved in so many things. I've had no engagement with neonatal care until I've started to do a little bit of research for this particular bill. You know, I've been fortunate in my life in that sense. It's been other things that affect us. But when you do start to look at things, you find organisations or things that are not necessarily in your constituency, could be close to your constituency. And I just want to talk a little bit about the sort of support that's out there that deals, that shows the importance that this bill reflects. And I'm going to touch on a charity based, actually in a neighbouring constituency of mine. It's called Leo's. And Leo was a child that was lost by a parent, but it was the first of a twin. And the second twin, Oscar, survived, and the message was something. I think the foundation of the charity was on the basis that Leo had given his life for his second twin. Now, how a parent goes through that, I can't comprehend. I have one child, very, very healthy, and I'm very, very thankful. But once you start to think about these sort of things, it's so easy. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional already, and it's not something I'm even close to in that sense. But I really want to just emphasise the importance that these parents suffer so much in terms of the pressures that are on, the mental health problems that are on. I looked at one of the stats on this on their website, and it talked about 79% of parents have mental health problems or challenges as a result of going to neonatal care. I don't understand why it's not 100%. It must be so traumatic to go through that space. And I think that the charities and people like Leo's, I understand, was instrumental in setting up, in founding the Neonatal Mental Health Awareness Week. It shows when something touches somebody really deeply, they go out and they reach and they get into other areas that they would probably never have imagined getting into. And I'd like some of the speeches that we've already heard show the connection that people have made. I had no particular connection to this, other than the fact that it's touched me because I've started looking at it a little bit for this bill and trying to see it. So really, my conversations, my talk, it's really about just emphasising the need for doing things for parents that are in this place, in this situation, and they have enough of a challenge going on without needing to try and worry about where the next penny is coming from. So I really must support what the honourable member has brought in this bill. I really commend him for it. And I don't know how the charities work properly and things, but it's all about not just the now, and it's not just the immediacy. It's about going forward. And one of the things that I noticed, I think it was earlier this year, the referrals into this charity, they got some funding out of County Durham Foundation Trust and things, but they're now oversubscribed. I think for the first time they actually had to stop referrals because there was so much demand. That shows the level of the issue that's going on. I think there's about 3,000 a year in the North East alone, apparently. And I think I could waffle for a little bit longer, but I really feel like I'm going round in circles a bit. But I really just want... I commend the bill. I really do thank him for bringing it. And as he said, it's not always that we are talking on such a united place across these particular benches, particularly for us in the North East that are quite close to the members in Scotland. So I'm going to conclude on that one, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'll try and find my notes for the next one before I get there.
Celine Saxby.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend, the member for Sedgefield, this morning, and I congratulate the member for Cumberland, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for bringing this bill through the House. It is an important piece of legislation that will support so many families around the UK. Neonatal care for premature and sick babies can have long-lasting impacts, as we've already heard, on a family, even once the baby is well and able to return home. These impacts range across logistical challenges, family dynamics, and even the future attainment of the baby. Bringing in additional care leave will, in the short term, alleviate the stress caused when one parent has to return to work. Paternity leave only provides for 2 weeks of leave from work for the 50,000 families who spend more than 1 week in neonatal care after birth every year. The father's chance to bond with the baby and support their recovering partner is severely limited. 70% of the families with a significant neonatal stay report that one parent had to return to work whilst the baby was still receiving care in hospital. The pressure this puts on the remaining parent as they make crucial decisions for their child alone, have to remain in hospital whilst recovering themselves, or face issues around childcare for older children is immense. In rural areas such as my North Devon constituency, families also have to face the challenges of getting to hospital, especially if one parent returns to work and the other cannot drive and has to rely on very sparse public transport. With longer maternity leave and pay entitlements, the parent left with the child is often the mother. In families which don't require neonatal care, the childcare burden still falls disproportionately on women. In 2018, government research found that fewer than 1 in 5 of all new mothers and 29% of first-time mothers returned to work full-time in the first 3 years after maternity leave. In the Childcare and Early Years Survey of 2021, around 71% of mothers with children aged 0 to 14 were in work. However, for new mothers, staying with the same employer is associated with a lower risk of downward occupational mobility, but also with lower chances of progression. A previous study found that a third of women returners reported a reduction in job status. Overall, women were less likely to return to work if they had not received any maternity pay at all. Whilst there has been notable progress in maternity leave for women and, of course, paternity leave, the lives of mothers when they return to work and how it affects their career progression and productivity has been less talked about. The burden of a mother facing exceptional care and health needs for their child is even higher. At present, parents of babies that are born prematurely have to leave their children at an earlier stage of development than other parents. This leads to many mothers reconsidering their plans and either significantly delaying their return or leaving the workforce altogether. Boosting productivity is crucial to boosting economic growth. Enabling more women to confidently return to work after maternity leave will not only reduce the gender pay gap and the gender gap in senior leadership positions, but go on to boost our economy. This bill does not just support families, but also helps British businesses manage parental leave. Often parents resort to statutory sick pay whilst their child is in hospital. This is not a suitable replacement for appropriate leave and pay for both parents and employers. Unlike neonatal pay, employers are unable to reclaim the cost of statutory sick pay, so the current system comes at a significant cost to businesses. Ultimately, a more stable family life will benefit the baby as it grows. 71% of families have reported that they are worried about the long-term outcomes for their preterm babies. Neonatal care prevents a lot of typical bonding such as skin-to-skin contact, feeding and other regular care. This bonding has been shown to improve weight gain, improve motor reflexes as the child grows and even reduce pain. By giving parents the right to neonatal care leave on top of maternity and paternity leave, families have more time to bond, increase their confidence in their parenting and reduce separation and financial stresses. We all want the best for our children, and supporting families as they face the challenges of neonatal care helps give them the best start in life. As is so often the case on a Friday, we do our best work here when we are together. And I'm delighted to be supporting this bill today.
Richard Fuller.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is a good measure proposed by a good and thoughtful Member of Parliament with whom I have worked in the past on other topics, and I know him to be a man of considerable integrity and compassion, and it's a delight to support him today. I shan't, as other colleagues have, struggle to name the 3 parts of his constituency. Well, okay, I'll have a go. Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East. Thank you. We have had a number of powerful speeches where members of Parliament have talked of their own experiences and those of their constituents as it relates to the matter of hand about neonatal care. And I hope it doesn't upset the House if I just take a slightly different angle, because in all of these measures that we do, we have to recognise that there is always a surplus of wants and needs of varying degrees of validity, this being one which I think we all agree has very high validity, but all of which can come with a cost on society. It might be a cost on the taxpayer. It might be a cost on business that could either make it harder for us to fund other public services or could make it harder for our businesses to increase employment, to increase growth, to achieve profitability. Actually, I want to go through that, if I may, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, because this is a good example of balance. As my honourable friend, the member for Watford, has mentioned already, there are times where you can see that this bill actually will enhance value for businesses by strengthening the ability of families to go back to work after a period that can have been very traumatic and testing for them. But I did think, Mr. Speaker, that I would go to that trustee steed for parliamentarians, the impact assessment. Now, honourable members may not know, but I don't know if all honourable members read impact assessments. They are a very... I'm seeing very many nods around the chamber, so I hope I'm not repeating what members already know. But impact assessments are a very valuable tool for us as legislators. They are an essential element, actually, of our ability to understand some of the costs and benefits, not just financial costs and benefits, from legislation that's put forward. And may I just gently say to the Minister, and I can do this to this Minister because I know that he already agrees with me, that over recent years, governments have got into the habit of perhaps not doing impact assessments as regularly as they should do. And that's a concern for us as members of Parliament. My honourable friend, the Minister, will be aware of the report in the House of Lords, Losing Impact, which has demonstrated that decline. So a gentle nudge as part of this bill would be just to reinforce the value of these impact assessments. But if I could just draw honourable members back to the point made by my honourable friend, the member for Clwyd South. Yes, Clwyd South on the costs. The reason why this bill is a demonstration of the good balance between a public policy and the burdens on society, or in this case on business, is that it has a widespread impact. I think my honourable friend mentioned that 1 in 7 of births in the UK in some way will be covered by this definition of neonatal care. Both premature babies, where I think the proportion is approximately about 2/3, 40,000 out of 60,000, and at-term babies, where the proportion is 10%, or about 60,000. So this is a measure that's going to have an effect on quite a large number of our population. And interestingly, it recognises, I think, and this is the subtlety, I think, of the proposal from my honourable friend who has proposed this bill, it recognises that money isn't the answer here. You know, there are so many other emotions going on and feelings and sentiments, but its value is a sort of recognition that there is something here where a little bit of help at the margins from society can help families in a particular part and time of need. So we are coming together as a society and saying we are a better society if at this very crucial time that can create an enormous amount of stress and pain for certain families, and certainly a tremendous amount of anxiety, if we just demonstrate that we recognise that's the period they're going through. And as has been said by honourable members, the opportunity then for people ultimately to perhaps feel that they can return to work more rapidly. I am concerned, if I may say, that it costs the HMRC £5 million to make a one-off change to their IT systems. And I would be grateful if the Minister could provide a very detailed assessment to us today of where that £5 million would go. He isn't responsible for the HMRC. I know that rests in the Treasury, but he may wish, as he is the Minister responsible for this, to understand why that cost is of such great significance. But the other costs relate to the ongoing costs to businesses. But there is a separate issue for businesses which isn't just about the financial cost. And that relates to their legal liability. This is a right that will extend across all sizes of businesses, from the very large multinationals all the way down to businesses that may only have one or two employers. I would be grateful if the Minister could advise if the right here is only a right upon application by the individual concerned to their employer, which I think it is. And if so, what has been the assessment of legal risk and liability for an employer should they not receive, or an employee not claim that and then subsequently claim it? Because there is quite a long period during which an employee can claim this right. And with the best will in the world, some small businesses don't keep records, don't keep information, may miss something. So is there something here in terms of the legal risk? It's really just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But the impact assessment does say this, which is the reason why I'm drawing the Minister's attention to it. That it says, quote, finally, this leave entitlement will create a minimum standard for an issue which is difficult to navigate for employers and employees. So I do think a little bit of clarification on that point would be helpful. I was interested, and I know honourable members certainly on this side will not be surprised by the statement on the impact statement. The question: does the implementation go beyond minimum European Union requirements? Answer: yes. This government, because of the fact that the people chose to take back control, because of the strong support for understanding what is in the vital and particular interests in the United Kingdom, are taking this measure forward beyond what minimum EU requirements are, and I'm sure all of us are very pleased about that. I raised with the proposer earlier on part, gosh, I can't remember it now, was it 12ZE, 1717Z16, Entitlement Clause 2, Subclause A, because that relates to the definition of neonatal care. And both he and I think, agree that regulations may define this. And the Honourable Member made a very good point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about how it should not necessarily just relate to a time in a neonatal care unit. I think the regulations do permit that broader aspect, but it would be helpful for the Minister just to clarify that point. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have come perhaps from a different angle from other colleagues, perhaps a passionless, emotionless contribution, uncharacteristically. But nevertheless, when we in this House pass measures, and I know we're looking at other bills later on, and I may come back with a slightly different view in a later bill, it is important that we bear that in mind. We are bearing that in mind today. We are all agreed, I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this measure passes that test of balance, and particularly on the Exchequer. And may I close by again congratulating the Honourable Member for his bill.
Yeah. Mr. Deputy Speaker, can I be the final backbench member to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for getting his bill to this stage, and to pay tribute to Bliss for all the brilliant work they've done, not just in this area, but in a whole range of campaigns relating to this area. I am biased because I used to run charities, but I think they play such an important role in pushing us to understand and in turn legislate on issues that we would just not perhaps think about in the daily rush that we have around this place. And it takes a lot of work, and it doesn't happen like that. They have to push and push and push for months and years, and sometimes even longer than that. And I think they've done a brilliant job in this case. I don't have children myself, but as it happens, my little sister was 7 weeks premature. And I therefore have some sense, because I was old enough, I have some sense of what a worrying, stressful time that is. I felt that as a child. So to be my mum or dad would have been much, much worse. And she was in an incubator, of course, coming out that early. It had to be done in an emergency. She was in an incubator. She weighed £4.4. Everybody kept saying 2 bags of sugar, 2 bags of sugar. You know, she weighs 2 bags of sugar, and it's correct. I checked this yesterday. It's exactly 2 bags of sugar. And and during that time in the incubator, she ripped her breathing tube out at least twice. You know, she didn't have any sense of what she was doing, but she, you know, this vital thing helping to keep her alive and try and get her to a healthier position, she just sort of ripped it out. She won't thank me for saying that may have been an indication of the personality she was going to have as an adult, but no, we're very close. And so although I don't have children, I don't think you need them to understand how completely obvious it is that this bill is so important, and why the honourable member's done such a good job. And in preparing for this, I read this stat that in the government's consultation, 99% of people supported statutory leave and pay that we're bringing in here. 99%. I mean, 99% is the sort of figure that you hear from a dictator when they're giving themselves more power or installing themselves for life. You know, 99% of my people voted for me to be the leader forever. I have never heard of a government consultation. I'm happy to give way to anybody who's heard anything like that before, but I have never heard of a government consultation that 99% of people were in favour of something, and that's again why I think this is such a no-brainer. And it was, you know, I was sad to read the study by Bliss about the parents who had got into financial difficulty as a result of this period. You know, they had money worries. They'd taken on debt often. Goes without saying it's had an impact on 80% of their mental health. I suspect 100%, but 80% of people at least admitted that it had had an impact on their mental health. And although it's the morally right thing to do, you know, we have to say from the point of view of employers, you're not going to get the best from someone who has got a baby in this care, because that, of course, is going to be their number one priority. And there's, by the way, a bigger point here, which is that those two things, debt and mental health, that without this important bill are carrying on for people as a result of these situations, have a big impact on people's relationships and in turn the raising of that child. We know there are certain things going on at home which, you know, are big. They create big conflicts, breaks in relationships. They can contribute to relationship breakdown, and just having them in the presence of the house can affect the child's development, as of course do things like low birth weight and so on. So this is part, I think, this bill, of a broader approach that we have to have about the raising of children, the importance of parenting, the importance of early years, which is, you know, too often one of these things we just leave people to get on with. You know, well, it will come naturally to you, we just leave you for it. I think there's a whole range of things we should be doing better to help parents in these early years with their children, right from birth. And so I'm very pleased to support this bill. I think it complements some of the other things government's done about shared parental leave and so on. We know we have further to go. We know we have some big disparities in how families, ethnic minority families, those on low incomes, the care that they're receiving compared to others. I unfortunately have a couple of constituents who have been affected by the issues at the Nottingham University Hospital Trust, which Donna Ockenden is looking at the moment. They sadly lost their daughter Winter. So we know we've got huge disparities here, but in the government's women's health strategy, they have exactly the right ambition, we're not there yet, but exactly the right ambition to try and make this the best place in the country to give birth. And I think that this bill today is an important component of helping us try to get there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to join a great queue of people congratulating the member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for bringing this hugely important private members' bill to this House today, and for all the work that he has done, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to bring this. And to all the honourable members who are here to support it. And I'd like to thank and congratulate Bliss and the charity Working Families, and to the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Sick and Premature Babies for all the work that they have done to campaign for this piece of legislation that will help so many families across the country. With all the members lining up to support this bill, it does beg the question as to why it's taken so long to get here, having been promised for many years. But Labour is absolutely committed to supporting this and to extending statutory maternity and paternity leave. The need for it could not be more real or acute. As colleagues have noted so far, this bill will bring in an entitlement to neonatal leave for both parents while a baby is receiving hospital care, for parents who qualify for maternity, paternity or adoption leave, and it will introduce an entitlement to neonatal pay for parents who meet minimum service and earning requirements, which means in practice that qualifying parents will be entitled to additional leave and pay if their baby spends at least 7 days being cared for in a health setting or other place, as has been outlined, before they reach 28 days. It will also mean that qualifying parents will be entitled to up to 12 weeks of paid leave, and that leave will be taken after maternity, paternity, adoption or bereavement leave, and may be taken within 68 weeks of first admission to neonatal care. And I also welcome the employment protections within this bill as well, including protection from dismissal or detriment as a result of having to take leave at this stressful time of a parent's life. I remember when my third child was born, being told that he would have to be taken into the special care baby unit. And the shock that that is, you just don't plan for it. All about birth can't really be planned, and I don't know why women are asked to fill in a birth plan, but that's another issue, because actually what happens can just change very rapidly. And that moment of being told, actually, what you thought was going to happen, having family come round, visiting your child, taking your child home, suddenly you're just consumed with worry about what will happen. And I am grateful to those members who've talked about their own personal circumstances today, and especially to the Honourable Member for Pontypridd, who has supported neonatal care leave since she was elected. Her story and that of her son Sully shows the need for this legislation to enable parents to focus on care for their children and not worry about whether or not they can take leave and if they will be paid or if even they will be dismissed. This will come as a huge relief for parents across the country. According to Bliss, the charity for babies born prematurely or ill, around 70% of families with a significant neonatal stay had at least one parent return to work while their baby was still in hospital. Bliss also found that 60% of fathers and non-birthing partners had to return to work while their baby was still receiving specialist neonatal care. 36% of fathers resorted to be signed off sick in order to spend time with their baby on the neonatal unit. And I think that's why this legislation is welcomed by businesses who are trying to get round it in other ways. But this is going to be much more straightforward and clear for all concerned. 24% of fathers said they were concerned for their job if they asked for more time off. 77% of parents felt like their parental leave was not long enough. And half of parents would have liked to take more parental leave but couldn't afford to take any longer time off. And shockingly, 11% of parents left their jobs due to having insufficient leave after their baby was admitted to neonatal care. This is not good for them, and it's not good for businesses either. Thankfully, many return home with their families after just a few days of care. But as we have heard, around 50,000 babies spend more than a week in neonatal care every year. And there is clinical evidence to suggest that babies in neonatal care have better outcomes when their parents are involved in providing hands-on or skin-to-skin care while they're in hospital. The neonatal environment is stressful, and parents need time to bond and adjust. Some parents will also have significant ongoing needs once they return home and may not be ready to be left in childcare by the time the parents have to start work again. Yet every year, thousands of parents have to return to work when their baby is still critically ill, relying on other family members, friends, and support from elsewhere to enable them to continue their care and continue their work. Also, some babies will spend many weeks or months receiving care on the neonatal unit before they're well enough to go home. And this means many parents use large amounts or even all of their leave entitlement before their baby goes home. And once they go home, they have to face all that need for leave as well. Many employers are understanding, as has been said. Many employers do the right thing and follow best practice in this area. And the majority of businesses have shown support for making expectations of leave in this legislation very clear, and that they can reclaim a percentage of statutory pay. This legislation will mean that parents don't rely on goodwill or the views of different managers and fear repercussions, but they can be assured of leave and protection from dismissal. So I want to end by asking a number of questions for the Minister while I have his attention here on a Friday morning. Firstly, while it's welcome to see a number of private members' bill in this House progressing workers' rights, does the Minister not believe that measures such as those that we're discussing here today would be best brought forward as a comprehensive employment bill in this Parliament? It was announced in the Queen's speech in December 2019, but has been missing in action ever since. Today we're going to see the TIPS bill being brought forward. The Flexible Working Bill has already been supported, the Carers Leave Bill has been passed, but the Fertility Treatment Employment Rights Bill remains as a private member's bill. All of these pieces of legislation and more could be addressed in one place and one piece, much more comprehensively and clearly in an employment bill. Secondly, legislation to improve workers' rights is vital, but without strong enforcement, unscrupulous employers will continue to break the law when it comes to workers' rights. Can the Minister update the House on what progress is being made on a single enforcement body for workers' rights to protect against discrimination? Third, the absence of neonatal leave is just one barrier that expectant and new mothers face in the workplace. What steps are the government taking to tackle discrimination in the workplace against women and ensure that no one is discriminated against for having a child? Fourthly, maternal and paternal leave is critically important to new parents, but the UK's statutory allowances and shared parental leave system leave much to be desired. Will the government extend statutory maternity and paternity leave and urgently review the shared parental leave system to give parents the time they need with their new baby, which is all part of the reason why this bill is being brought forward today? Finally, and to conclude, it's often the trade unions on the front line against unscrupulous employers who support parents in making sure that they receive their rights that are being extended to them today. But the thanks they get from this government for protecting workers is a constant barrage of attack and some of the strictest trade union lords in Europe. I'm proud to work alongside our unions, and I ask the Minister, will he stop the government's attempts to undermine trade unions, such as we saw earlier this week? Let me end by thanking again the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East for spearheading this fantastic piece of legislation, and he and parents across the country can rest assured that it has the full support from the Labour Party. Thank you.
Minister Kevin Hollenbrake.
I'm very grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I also, of course, thank the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kintilloch East for all his work in bringing forward this very important legislation and debate for the third time. It is a great honour to bring forward private members' bills. I've been lucky enough in my time to bring forward two private members' bills, one on guardianship and one that has sadly a connection with this particular bill, which is the one on parental bereavement, which he was very supportive of through my work. It's not just a great honour, it's a great deal of work, and I pay tribute to all his work on this over the last months. It's one of those pieces of legislation, I think, as we often get asked when we bring a new measure forward like this, doesn't that exist already? And when you get that reaction, it's time we moved quickly to try and bring this legislation forward. So I can thank him and all honourable members who have spoken on this very important matter today. I'd also like to thank my predecessors. I've been in this role only a short time, which is a common feature of small business ministers, I think, in this place over the last few months. But many of my predecessors done hugely important work on this particular issue, not least my honourable friend, the member for Sutton and Cheam, my honourable friend, the member for Loughborough, my honourable friend for the member for Watford, and thank you him very much for his contribution today and his wholehearted support for this bill, but also for the next bill as well, which I think will be, I know he's keenly awaiting, as is my other friend, the member for Innis Mons. So another important piece of legislation. The government and myself also are deeply committed to ensuring the UK is the best place in the world to work and grow a business. We need a strong and flexible labour market which supports participation and economic growth. I want to talk now about the bill that is before the House today for the third reading. The Neonatal Care, Leave and Pay Bill will enable thousands of parents to care for and be with their children in neonatal care without worrying about whether their job is at risk. This bill, as we can see from today's debate, has support across this House, and I was very pleased to hear that reflected in this debate. So I'd like to take the time to address some of the points raised by all the members today. But first, I'd like to put on record why the government is continuing to support this legislation. Just to pick up on a couple of points first before I go into that. Both the Shadow Minister and the Honourable Member for Pontypridd talked about other measures we may take forward in the employment bill or by other means. And I would just, although she spoke very movingly in her speech, and I commend her for that, I think she said this government was eroding workers' rights, and I can't think there's anything further from the truth. If I can just set out some of the measures the government is taking aside from this particular legislation, all measures that I'm actually responsible for as the business minister, making flexible working a day one right. That's something we are tending to do. Carers leave, allowing a week's carers leave for all people, for all workers. More protections for people who are pregnant or returning to work from pregnancy or paternity leave. The tips. I'm very happy to give way.
I'm grateful for the Minister for giving way, but I'm sorry, I cannot sit here and listen to him say that his government are not eroding workers' rights. So you're literally bringing forward legislation to prevent workers from doing the absolute fundamental of withholding their right to strike. And as any worker knows, that is the last armoury you have in order to protect yourself. So if you're doing nothing but eroding workers' rights, sorry, if the government are doing nothing but eroding workers' rights, then what are you doing?
Well, we can have a good debate about this a week on Monday, I think. But I think it's safe to say the opposition parties seem to be simultaneously arguing that minimum service levels exist across Europe, and they also say that strikes are happening across Europe, and the two things are incompatible. Clearly, we are not taking away the right to strike. We are simply saying, as nurses are doing right, we know that nurses have voted to strike on the 7th and 8th of February. We're simply saying, yes, you can strike, but as nurses do, they will put a voluntary agreement in place to put minimum service levels in place. A derogation, as they call it. Those two things are not incompatible.
Order. With respect, this is the Neonatal Care Bill. Minister.
I do apologise, Mr Deputy Speaker. The matter has been referred to by a number of different members in this debate. So I do think it was... I felt it was... I need to address it, but I will move on, certainly, on your instructions, sir. Indeed, and other measures, of course, increasing the national living wage to £10.42 very shortly. So a number of measures to strengthen workers' rights rather than reduce workers' rights. As the Honourable Member explained to the House, in the UK, an estimated 100,000 babies are admitted to neonatal care every year following their birth for a range of medical reasons. The Honourable Member for Cheadle explained that the numbers are certainly the tens of thousands of children who are in neonatal care for a week or longer. So this is clearly an issue that affects many, many parents. I think in 2018, our study identified 37,400 children who were in neonatal care for more than a week after birth. So clearly a hugely important issue. The United Kingdom has generous entitlements and protections designed to support employed parents to balance their family and work commitments and maintain their place in the labour market whilst raising their children. However, for parents in the worrying position of having their newborn admitted to neonatal care, it is clear that the current leave and pay entitlements do not provide adequate support. The Government has previously consulted on this issue, and in March 2020 we committed to introducing a new entitlement to neonatal leave and pay. So that's why the Government is pleased to support this bill, which will bring that policy into effect. As the Honourable Member set out, this is a statutory leave entitlement which protects employees against any detriment. Many employers would do this by right anyway, as just being a considerate employer, but nevertheless there are a minority of employers perhaps do not, and this ensures that they will in the future. This gives a right for anybody with a child in neonatal care for 7 full days of continuous care. It is a day one right for leave and a right to pay based upon continuity of service. Touching on one or two points that have been made by our members in the debate, before I do that, can I just pay thanks to the Honourable Member, the member for Thornbury and Yates, for all his work on this. I think this idea was first introduced into the House with an adjournment debate, which was responded to by our honourable friend, the member for Sutton and Cheam. I know the honourable member for Pontypridd has been campaigning on this long and hard, as has the member for Glasgow East, who also chairs the all-party group on premature and sick babies. We should pay tribute to all those people. Indeed, and many people in this debate and in previous debates on this have spoken about their personal experiences, very movingly. As the father of 4 children, I also had one of my children who was in neonatal care, who was very jaundiced. It was our first child, actually, very jaundiced when he was first born, and that's a massive worry for any parents. It's not just the jaundice itself, it can have other health implications, including deafness. As a first child, it's a huge, even more worrying instance, I think. So all those contributions really resonated with me, and I'm sure others in the House today. The honourable friend, the member for Cheadle, quite rightly thanked the charity Bliss and other charities that support families through their difficult time. The honourable member for Pontypridd also thanked the charity Bliss. She is vice chair of the all-party group for sick and premature babies, so thank you for her work there. And obviously she has her own personal experience of this, and her son was obviously born prematurely, and I'm very grateful that her husband's employer was very flexible in this, but also how she drew the House's attention to her experiences. The honourable member, my honourable friend, the member for Watford, showed huge empathy, of course, as always, for parents who go through this experience, and he has not much experience in this himself, having been the Bill Minister at one point for this, and obviously emphasised the impact that having a premature or poorly baby has on parents' mental health, and this bill will massively help ease anxiety. The Shadow Minister and the member for Pontypridd asked about how long this has taken to bring to the House. Legislation is never that speedy, and only in emergency times perhaps, but this is a 2019 manifesto commitment. I think 2020 we took forward a consultation. Clearly there's been some other issues we've had to deal with over recent years, but we're keen to expedite this legislation and pleased to see it's passing through its final stages in the House. The Shadow Minister also asked about single enforcement body. We've got this matter under review, but I think she can see from what we're doing that there's a tremendous amount of work going on other pieces of legislation that we're keen to bring forward. I'm very happy to have a separate conversation with her any time in terms of other measures she'd like to see us implement. The Honourable Member for North Devon emphasised how this will benefit fathers and non-birthing partners, as they will have leave to spend with their child in hospital, and also the benefits to business. They will be able to reclaim the money via HMRC, so less of a financial burden. My honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, as always, raises some very interesting points, and as always, I was very pleased to hear him talking about the potential impact on business. And it's quite right that we do consider that. We do ask business to do more and more for their employees, I think quite rightly, but nevertheless we should always consider the impact on business. I think he talks about the impact assessment, which states that the financial impact on business is estimated to be around £22 million per annum, so not an inconsiderate amount, and it's absolutely right that we consider that as part of this, but nevertheless, on balance, it is the right thing to do. He also questions why it cost £5 million for HMRC to set this entitlement up. It's a very, very good question. And as he says, I don't look after HMRC directly, but I am told, of course, that they need to update their IT systems and support employers and payroll providers to do the same. This is a sizable project, but is primarily a matter for HMRC and the Treasury, so you may want to ask a question of the relevant Treasury Minister. He also asked the assessment of legal risk if employers do not claim at the time but claims later. The regulations will specify how long an employee has to claim entitlements to leave and pay, but the bill specifies this cannot be less than 68 weeks after the birth of the child. When it comes to pay, there is a power in the bill which could require someone to still be employed by the same employer when the claim for pay starts. We acknowledge the point that has been made by my honourable friend, and this will be considered carefully when the regulations are drafted. He also asked about the debt. Yes, happy to give way.
It just alerts me, and I don't expect to have the answer right now, which is that obviously there may be a change of the employment situation for the individual between the moment that they had their child and then when they make their claim. And could you just make sure that the regulations are flexible enough for the right claim to be made at the right time in the right way? And frankly, more broadly on this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where there are statutory rights that individuals should claim, it should be easy for them to be able to do it automatically through, say, because I don't know if the members here have the HMRC app. No? You should get it. It's a really good idea. But it really ought to be moving. The government should be moving to the fact that these are automatic things that individuals can control, not having to go through a paper process. That's better for the individual, higher proportion of claims, and reduces the burdens on business, and ensures more likely they're legally compliant.
Very grateful for Tim's comments, and I totally agree with him. We should make the process as easy as possible to ease the burden on business, and that's certainly something we'll look at within these regulations. In terms of neonatal definition, we're looking at in regulations, but hospital care, outreach care potentially, as the Honourable Member said, and tragically, perhaps palliative care would be the key areas. Honourable Member for East Berkshire told a very moving story of her friend Kirsty, whose daughter needed neonatal care. Honourable friend the member for Innis Mon, her own experiences of a child who spent time in neonatal care. Honourable friend the member for Wantage, 2 bags of sugar, 2.2 pounds each a bag of sugar, I think. Also talked about the other measures the government is taking to improve workers' rights. Honourable member for Clwyd South paid tribute to the Charity Blisses campaigns on this issue. Honourable friend the member for Sedgefield, even without notes, spoke about the charity Leo's, named after a baby who died, sadly, tragically. So, without further ado, if I can, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government is supporting this bill in line with our ongoing commitment to support workers and build a high-skilled, high-productivity, high-wage economy. It is good to see there is support from across the political spectrum in the House for this important measure, as is clear from this debate today. And can I just thank, if I may, in conclusion, civil servants who worked on the bill, Rosie Edmonds, Tolu O'Daly, Roxana Baccaria, Abby Bridger, Brian Halker, Jane McCann and Cora Sweet, who's in the box today. And finally, I look forward to continuing to work with a member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kintilloch East to support the passage of these measures.
Leave the House, Stuart C McDonald, to wind up the debate.
I'm very grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, and with the leave of the House. Can I first of all thank the Minister and the Shadow Minister for confirming ongoing support for this bill. It really is appreciated, and I too also want to say a massive thank you to Bay's officials for all their fantastic help throughout this process. While the broad principles of the bill are quite clear and powerful, there's quite a lot of technical stuff involved in this as well, and I'm really grateful to them for their help. But more than anything, grateful to members from right across the House, grateful for so many members contributing and doing so in such a positive and powerful fashion. And in fact, I think probably the personal is often the most powerful, and there were good examples of that today from the honourable members from Pontypridd, for Ynysmon, for Wantage as well, again all exemplifying that point. Honourable friend for Eastern Banffshire talking about Kirsty's experiences, and the honourable member for Sedgefield said he's waffling, but I thought he spoke incredibly powerfully about Leo's charity, so I thank him as well. Also struck by the number of members who have repeatedly been here to speak about this bill, including, for example, the honourable member for Cheadle and for Watford, so I thank them for doing that. Some honourable members raised additional points that I neglected. An honourable member for Clwyd South speaking about neonatal staff, who I also want to thank. I had the pleasure of visiting the neonatal unit in Wishaw, and the staff there and the parents who were there at that time all spoke very supportively about what this bill would mean for them as well. He also raised the point about the relatively limited amount of expenditure this will entail for the Exchequer, something that the honourable member and honourable friend for North East Bedfordshire also spoke about. He was very kind to me, but he did take on quite rightly the role of scrutinising what this exactly means, including the role of HMRC in all this, and if and when this bill finally reaches the statute book, it will be all about pressing them to get this up and running as fast as possible. And then finally, the honourable member for North Devon quite rightly drew attention to some specific features of the challenges of those living in rural areas, as well as some of the problems just now that are encountered because fathers in particular are quite often having to resort to use of sick pay, which is in nobody's interest, not theirs nor their employers. Finally, the honourable member for Wantage takes me on to what I want to say more importantly, and that's to thank all the charities that have made the case over many years that's got us to this place. So they include Bliss, who have been mentioned several times, and they were key drivers in introducing me to this. The